Welcome to KRA's The Hub, the official podcast of KRA Corporation. And now get ready to hear workforce topics and trends you need to know on the go.
Hello and welcome back to KRA's The Hub. This is Doug Foresta. Of course, with me is Jonathan Overall, Director of Workforce Development and Program Performance. Also joining us today, our special guest is Josh Davies, the CEO of the Center for Work Ethic Development. Jonathan, Josh, welcome. Great to be here with you.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be part here. I'm a big fan of the work at KRA, and Doug, you're not so bad either.
Thank you. That's the best compliment I'll get all year. So Josh, before we start, I mentioned you're the CEO of the Center for Work Ethic Development, but I want our listeners to know a little bit more about you. So say a little bit about your background and how you came to found the Center for Work Ethic Development.
Thank you for that. And like a lot of us in workforce, it's not a career path that many people just, oh yeah, that's what I want to do out of high school. When I finished college, I was moved into the field of professional training and development, specifically in the hotel and restaurant industry. I spent the first 15 years of my career doing leadership development, training, ended as vice president of training and development for a large hotel management company, and loved it, loved the work. I love the people. One of the things that I really, truly admire about the hospitality industry is that it is truly a person's soft skills, right? Those intrinsic things that will make them successful no matter what they choose to do. It's not about which degree you have. It's not about where you went to college. I love that. But after 15 years, I was looking for something with a little bit more social impact, right? Something that had more. And we did stuff in the community. We helped out. But at the end of the day, it's about getting heads in beds. And I wanted to do more than just that. And I left there and was looking for the next opportunity. And a colleague of mine here in the Denver area, a guy by the name of Eric Chester, I had written a book called Bring Your A Game to Work. And it was all about helping young kids understand the skills that would make them successful no matter what they chose to do. And it was a good book, was well received, but he wanted it to be more. And so we worked together with another gentleman named Matt Smith, and we came together and we said, let's do something more. And so we created the Center for Work Ethic Development, taking the intellectual property of the book, the concepts, and then trying to figure out how to make it something that people could use. And so we developed a whole curriculum called Bring Your A Game and realized it wasn't something that was just about young people. Really, the skills that we were talking about, the work ethic that employers were demanding was in a deficit, not just with teens, but with folks of all ages. And so we've created different versions of the curriculum and now serve more than 750 different organizations across all 50 states. We're currently in 7 countries. We just signed an agreement last month to get into our 8th, signed an exclusive partnership with a firm out in Saudi Arabia. And it's been fantastic. We work not only with workforce providers and organizations like KRA, but also with K-12 education, post-secondary, adult ed, correctional ed, veterans groups, anyone and everyone who's preparing people for the world of work. And that's what's awesome is you really get to touch people at wherever they are in their journey and entering into the workforce.
That's great. Josh, let's talk more about work ethic. It's something that clearly employers want in their employees, but what goes into work ethic? How do you define it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you were to ask 100 different people, how do you define work ethic? You'd probably come up with 100 different versions, 100 different answers. So what we try and do is get research, get data to back up where we are and the directions we want to go. And so what we found through our research was that it wasn't one thing that defined work ethic. It was a series of foundational skills, 7 things that employers said were really the bare minimum, no matter what career pathway people were in, no matter where they were in the country, and we found even no matter where they are in the world. The 7 skills, more than anything else, are having a positive attitude, bringing that and taking the choice, having some emotional intelligence there, not to let your emotions get the best of you. Attendance, right? You still have to show up on time every time. You have to have good appearance, in particular these days, not just in your clothing that you wear, but about your electronic communication, whether that's email, text, social media. You have to have ambition to do more than the bare minimum to get by. You have to have acceptance. You have acceptance of different people, but also of your boss, of the rules. You have to have appreciation of the people you're working with and the people you work for. And then, of course, cornerstone of it all, you have to have accountability. You have to do what you say you're going to do, as they often say, even when no one's watching. Those are what we found are the 7 fundamental skills that make up work ethic. And that's what employers are looking for more than anything else. Specific skills, work experience, education, consistently, those work ethic skills are number one.
Josh, I feel like every generation always says, when I was young, we walked exactly. I walked up a hill both ways to school. But I am really curious about, I intuitively have a sense that the emerging workforce may have different ideas about work ethic than, and we'll talk in a little bit about generational differences, but more just specifically about Gen Z, the emerging workforce. Do you see any difference in how they see work ethic?
It's difficult to generalize Gen Z. What you find is it's young people at every age. You look at it as a proud member of Gen X myself. It's easy to forget about being labeled as the slacker generation just 25 years ago. And then the millennials come around, this me, privileged, entitled narcissist. And like every generation, right, we keep passing in. The reality is it's just about young people. One of the bigger challenges with Gen Z, if you want to get into the data, the biggest challenge with them as it relates to work is that the lowest percentage of young people, teens, have had work experience before going into the workforce. Right? We're talking where we used to have 50 to 60% of teens in America actively engaged in the labor market. Now that number's around 25%. Right? Only 1 out of every 4 young people are working. And so they just don't have that experience. And so it's difficult because they don't know what they don't know. What I've found as we talk about generations, we can go more into this, but one of the really interesting things I looked at was a meta study that was done by the Journal of Business and Psychology. What a meta study is instead of doing their own, they just aggregate other studies. In this case, they found 77 different studies and research projects linking work ethic and age generation. And what they found was that there was no statistically significant difference in the work ethic of any one of the 3 main generations at work. At the time, Gen X, baby boomers, and millennials, all basically the same. The reality is the perception can be there, but when it comes down to it, the skills and being able to deliver it don't matter about how old you are. In fact, one of the things that I find real surprising, we work with, obviously, again, middle school, high school, WIOA youth programs, but we also have partners who are running CSEP, right? Senior Citizen Employment Programs, where they're helping 50 and 60-year-olds get retrained, and they're teaching them these same skills. So it's not limited to what age you are. It's more a question of awareness and then skill development across all ages. One of the things that I find is really interesting, another study, again, I've got a host of these because I collect this stuff and try and find out about it. That's the study with the generations and work ethic. There weren't enough Gen Z yet to be in that study, but another one came out a couple of years ago. Now there are enough Gen Z that millennials got to be asked their opinions about Gen Z in the workplace. Number one word that millennials use to describe Gen Z: lazy. It's real quickly how quick that mantle gets passed on to the next group. That's really the only consistent. It's not whether or not they actually have the skills. It's about how quickly the perception gets shifted to the next young group of kids.
Hey, Josh, obviously over the last few years, we've all gone through the pandemic, also the post-pandemic workforce. And I know this has been a big issue for a lot of companies throughout the U.S. Have you noticed any difference in work ethic for workers working remotely versus in person?
So work ethic is difficult to measure in that space, but I think probably the best way to look at it is a study that Gallup did. Gallup, of course, has been for years really focused on this idea of employee engagement. If you're more engaged, then you're more likely to be more productive and probably have a better work ethic in terms of demonstrating those skills. And they looked and measured it based on how many days a week an employee was in the office, right? So are you fully remote? Are you coming in a day or two? Are you fully in the office? And interestingly enough, they found that the scores for engagement were the lowest for people who worked entirely remotely and who came into the office every day for 5 days. The highest work ethic, the highest engagement happened at around 3 days in the office, 2 days out. And so that's been a real interesting look. People talk about, hey, I like this, I don't like it. But in terms of engagement numbers, which I think will correlate directly into that work ethic, the remote work by itself is bad, but a hybrid approach can really help drive that and help produce some results. Interestingly enough, though, we talked about generations before. The one generation, people are like, Gen Z, they've been remote their whole lives. The one generation that wants to be in the office more than the other is Gen Z. They realize the connections that you make, those relationships, the mentoring, just even the day-to-day conversations don't happen when you're on a Zoom call. And they're really longing for that opportunity. Plus, if you think back about it, I don't know how long ago it was for either of you when you first got into the workforce, but a lot of your social life is driven by those work relationships and those friends that you make and those connections. And so without that, that's been a real issue more than anything else as we look at kind of the impact of remote work. Older workers, baby boomers, older Gen X, they're loving it. They don't have to commute anymore. They've got a kind of life figured out. But for those younger workers, finding a hybrid approach where they can be in the office and work remotely, I think it's going to be really key to keeping them engaged and keeping that work ethic moving.
Josh, do you have any theory about, I think it's intuitive that if you're fully remote, that you might be less engaged, but what about the people who went in every single day and are less engaged? Do you have any theory about that?
Here's the thing is I think if we hadn't gone through the pandemic, as Jonathan said, right, things are dramatically different than they have been, right? But if people didn't know any better, I don't think engagement would be down. But I think now people are realized, you're like, man, I have to commute in every day. I have to be in this seat. Like I could be more productive if I was at home. And now you're making me come in every single day. I think that's what's causing it to go down. Again, I don't have any data to back that up. This is what my impression of it is. You can't get that toothpaste back in the tube. Once people have realized that remote work actually works, I think it's hard to convince people that they need to be in without a really solid business case. And I think for a lot of managers, a lot of bosses, a lot of organizations, they haven't done a good job of explaining why it's so important to be there every day, right? Why do we need to be in this space? Why do we need to be together? Once you do that, I think it's really easy to get buy-in, but I don't think most organizations have done that other than that's just how we always used to do it. We need to go back.
All right. So here's a question. I know you talked about being in the workforce and first entering the workforce. I won't say how long ago it was, but
yeah,
it was a long time ago.
Couple years, Doug.
A couple of years. There was a Bush in office and it wasn't W. So anyway, so here's a devil's advocate question for you.
Yeah.
I know that there's sometimes this idea that you either have a work ethic or you don't, right? And
yeah.
But let's take it from the perspective of I'm an employee or a job seeker. Can I actually improve my work ethic? And if so, how do I do that?
Oh, absolutely. There used to be this idea that sort of work ethic was maybe baked into you by the time you were 12 or something like that. The reality is, like everything else, when you break it down from this sort of theoretical idea of just work harder to this idea of, hey, here are 7 specific skills. Here are 7 behaviors. Here are things that you can do that will drive that work ethic. That's really where skill development happens. But if you're just soft with it, and I hate the term soft skills, right? It implies that they're somehow not difficult, that they're not as important. The reality is, I think the reason why people call them soft skills is because they're mushy and they don't like to talk about it and they don't really define them. But if you clearly define what they are, people can develop them and really build that strength. We tell people like, hey, Jonathan, I need you to bring a better attitude to work tomorrow. You're like, okay. So like a sign in my head that's been like good attitude, like how do you know? And so unless you define it, and that's where we come into play, and that's what we're all about, is clearly defining those expectations, right? We say attitude is bring a positive attitude every single day. Take control of the way you react. So what can I say? Look, you had something bad that happened to you yesterday, Jonathan. You're letting it upset you still today, right? You're not taking control of your emotions. You're letting it control how you react. So how do you have a better attitude? You take control of that. And that almost becomes this at a higher level, sort of like an EQ kind of thing, right? Where you're controlling your emotions and working on that side. But when you define it, that's when people can develop it. That's when they can demonstrate it on a consistent basis. But unless you do that, it's really hard to develop work ethic beyond those early stages.
Josh, you shared a lot today about the work that you do in developing the worker in the workplace. What advice would you have for employers who are looking to ensure that their employees have a strong work ethic? What would that word of advice look like?
Yeah, and that goes for employers in every sector, but in particular workforce development. It's a simple thing more than anything else. Like people are like, what should we do? You have to model the behavior you want. What I see in all these organizations where they have really poor work ethic of their employees and their managers and their supervisors, I don't understand it. They're not modeling it, right? They're showing up late. They're not meeting their deadlines. They're not holding people accountable. They're not accountable themselves, right? If you don't model what you want, you can talk all you want. You talk to your blue in the face. It won't make a difference. You have to model the expectations you want. And when you do that, that's the best way to then carry that on and get your employees, no matter who they are, no matter what they're doing, in person, remote, to continue to develop these skills. Without that, you might as well not even try. I'd argue you can even diminish people's work ethic, right? If they're working for a toxic boss or somebody who just doesn't get it, you can bring all you want to the table, but after a while, you just get beat down, and then you're just going to fall back to that lowest performing level that's acceptable.
So I know after people hear this, Josh, this is really great stuff. And so I know people are going to be like, that Josh Davies, I must have him I must bring him in. I must get some consulting. Tell people a little bit about what you do and how they can find you.
The easiest way to just talk about it, and if this was a video, I put it up on the screen, but it's www.workethic.org. That's the site for the Center for Work Ethic Development. It's got all of our tools, all of our resources. We have a curriculum that we can either do as an online piece that's self-directed for participants. There's also the original version designed to be done in small group workshops by either a workforce development professional, an educator, anybody, because we found you need to create awareness. You need to create some basic understanding. And the best way to do that is to set things up into person is probably the best way to do it. But all those resources are there. You can find out more about that. You can sign up for free weekly work ethic tips. You can learn about bringing me out to come speak to your organization. I do a lot of that. I just got back yesterday from California, where I was out there doing some work for the Department of Rehabilitation. Lots of great opportunities to take advantage of this. And it doesn't have to be a massive commitment. Just making some basic approaches, some basic things can really have a huge impact internally, and in particular for your job seekers.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Our guest has been Josh Davies, the CEO for the Center of Work Ethic Development. Josh, Jonathan, thanks for another great conversation.
Absolutely. I could talk for days on this probably, but it's great to get the opportunity to speak to this, to the great people out there at KRA. Love the work that you're doing. Keep it up. You are making a difference, not just in lives, but in families and communities. And don't ever forget that, because it's easy sometimes to miss the forest for the tree that's in front of you. Just remember, bring your A game every single day.
Thank you, Josh. It's always great to connect with you. I think there were a lot of aha moments for our audience today, and appreciate your time and all that you shared with us.
Thank you for listening to KRA's The Hub. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about KRA Corporation, visit www.kra.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back soon with a new episode.